California's Gold is produced in association with KCET Los Angeles and is seen statewide on California Public Television. This series is endorsed by the California Teachers Association, the California School Boards Association, and the California Library Association. It's a beautiful and desolate stretch of highway that cuts through the desert, over the mountains, and into Death Valley. Officially, it's California State Highway 190 that connects the eastern Sierra town of Lone Pine with Death Valley. And today, driving over this smooth, paved, well-maintained road in air-conditioned comfort, you'd never know that when this remote stretch of highway was dedicated back in 1937, it was a big deal. It was also the site of one of the most elaborate, colorful, unusual, and innovative celebrations ever to take place in California. You see, technically, when this highway opened, it connected the highest point in the continental United States, Mount Whitney, which is near Lone Pine, with the lowest point, Badwater, which is in Death Valley. And that fact was all that the local parish priest at the time, Father John Crowley, needed to get his creative juices flowing. A tireless promoter and booster of the local area, he organized a 3-day pageant, a pageant that included a cast of characters from movie stars to the governor. Thousands turned out to watch and enjoy. It was one for the record books. And now, over 60 years later, we've come back to reminisce and recreate the wedding of the waters.
I love you, California. You're the greatest state of all. I love you in the winter, summer, spring, and in the fall. I love your fertile valleys, your dear mountains I adore. I love your grand old ocean, and I love her rugged shore.
Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Huell.
You know why we're here, don't you?
You're here for the Wedding of the Waters story.
The Wedding of the Waters story. And to get all the information we could officially, we thought we'd come here first to your museum, which is kind of the museum of record here in the Eastern Sierra. Tell us what you know about the Wedding of the Waters.
Well, until you guys started looking into it, we really didn't know very much. We knew it was an event that happened in the late 30s. We knew Father Crowley was involved with it. We had a couple of artifacts left over from the celebration, some nice photos, but we really didn't have much of the story at all. And we've done a lot of oral history here, and the story really hadn't come through in the interviews we'd done.
Now, why not? Because this was a big deal when it happened, wasn't it?
It's kind of a mystery why it wasn't more of an event in people's memory than it is, because it was a really big deal. Part of it was the times. It took place in the late 30s when there was a lot of changes going on around here. The city of Los Angeles had purchased 90% of the Owens Valley. They owned most of the land in the towns. The farming economy was changing completely. Farming was gone, and tourism was coming in. So Father Crowley designed this whole event, I think, to promote tourism for the area.
So this was a big PR event.
It was a huge PR event, and Father Crowley was a master at it.
Well, we're going to find out as this story develops just how much of a master he was, because he really left no stone unturned as far as exciting, interesting historical details were concerned.
He did a masterful job.
Okay, now let's look at the collection here that you've got. You're putting on your gloves because we're heading to the Holy of Holies here. This is the kind of the centerpiece of the whole Wedding of the Waters. And if you could pull that out for us. Oh boy, there it is.
This is the gourd.
This is the gourd that carried the water through all of its stops from Mount Whitney to Badwater. And it has been in your museum for how long?
We don't even have the actual record of when it came into the museum. The article in a newsletter at the time said that the lady who made it, Mrs. Park, When she presented it to Father Crowley, she indicated to him that it was to come to the museum when he was through with it. And he said yes, he would do that, but he was going to keep it around his own diggings for a while because he thought it was pretty special.
But it's been in your museum for a while.
It's been here 50 years.
And it's been here long enough, and it's important enough to you that you wouldn't let us have this for our recreation, would you?
No, we wouldn't. Our job is to take care of this and keep it forever.
Okay.
And it would have had a little too much wear and tear in the actual recreation.
But we have done something else. Since you wouldn't let us have the original gourd, we have the next best thing. Jeanette, tell us what you've done for us here.
Well, we recreated the gourd. It's not as large as the original one, but they're able to use it in transporting all the different modes of transport that you'll be working on the next few days.
Great. Okay, so, and you've even gone to the detail of inscribing it exactly the way, and let's read what it says. Ceremonial gourd used in the dedication of the Mount Whitney Badwater Highway, October 29th to 31st, 1937. And you've dutifully recreated that for us.
With the etching of Mount Whitney and Badwater. Well, we didn't get the Badwater on the back, but on the original gourd, it's an etching of Badwater and the presentation by Mrs. Parks from the International Gourd Society.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for providing this for us. Bill, we're going to leave you and your gourd here. You can put it back in its place of honor. And
we'll keep it under safe lock and key.
We're in store, don't you think, for a great 2 or 3 day experience here.
It's going to be tremendously exciting. This will be a real bit of history, living history.
And so we were off to begin our Wedding of the Waters adventure. Our first stop was Mount Whitney, the place where it all started October the 29th, 1937. Well, here we are beneath this beautiful waterfall. We've come up to Mount Whitney. I'm standing here with Joan Brooks. Joan has written the definitive book on Father Crowley. Father Crowley is the fellow who came up with this whole idea of Wedding of the Waters. Joan, what was he thinking of when he put this together?
Well, Father Crowley was Irish, and he had a very poetic and romantic imagination. And he came up with this idea of wedding the waters from Mount Whitney, which was the highest place in the United States at that time, and the lowest place in the United States at that time, which was Badwater. Both places were in his parish. It's hard to believe, but that was the situation. And he wanted to make it a really historic occasion. And he loved history of California, spent a lot of time researching it and writing about it. And he wanted to help others learn about it too. So he organized this pageant. It took 6 months for the committee that he organized to come up with the details of who would do what and how they would get them and all the other events that were surrounding this particular pageant.
And the idea was that they were wedding the waters,
Exactly.
mixing the waters from Mount Whitney with Badwater, the highest and lowest places, and in between the water in this gourd would
Yes.
be carried by different means of transport.
Exactly, by all the different means of transportation over the time period that Mount Whitney was there, say from the Indian time, to the more modern time, which was an airplane. And we'll see in the rest of the film, I think.
Yeah, because we're just starting it now. We are at the very beginning. We have kind of set all of this thing up now, and the first means of transport was by Native American,
That's right.
and it started at the lake up on Mount Whitney.
That's right.
The lake was,
Tulainyo.
and the Indian, the Native American, brought this water down in a gourd
That's right.
to this point right here.
Yes.
This is amazing. Right on cue, here comes the water in the gourd off the side of the mountain. Okay, here they come. This is the beginning. This is all very exciting, fellas. Introduce yourselves to us.
Yeah, Doug Thompson. This is Cheyenne.
Hi,
Cheyenne.
Cheyenne Casada. Nice to meet you.
Now, who's got the water?
I do.
You got the water. Tell us what it was like up there.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Was it hard to get up there?
Absolutely. Very hard. Very hard. I'm surprised I made it. I wanted to quit a few times. This guy here kept me going.
Well, you've been up there a number of times
Yeah.
before. What's it like up there?
Well, it's complete rock barren and no vegetation. It's a beautiful experience, but it's real hard to get there.
Well, isn't it technically the highest lake, the highest water
Yeah,
in North America?
fresh
That's
water.
why
Yeah.
Father Crowley wanted to get the water from that lake.
Yeah,
And we weren't able to go up there because literally you told us we couldn't get this camera up there, could
it's
we?
pretty heavy. Equipment will really slow everybody down. Yeah,
And how did Cheyenne do?
Shine did really well for the first time a mountaineering cross country. He did really well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. He's being kind.
So you were huffing and puffing.
Oh, yeah. I had that 30-pound rucksack on my back, and I had to drop it
Yeah.
about halfway up there. I just couldn't do it.
Well, did you feel like you were part of history? Do you know the story about Wedding of the Waters?
I do, and I'm very honored to be a part of it. I'll do it again.
You heard him say
yeah,
that.
Yeah, he would do it again. Yeah.
Well, you are Native American,
I am.
right?
Yes, Cherokee.
And also a member of the Highway Patrol here in California.
I am.
And you're carrying the gourd right here.
Yes.
Now we have, you now have to pass this gourd off to the next segment. So let's go over there. We have the next leg of our Wedding of the Waters waiting right over here. Your name, sir?
Gabe Fogarty.
And it's no accident that you are here today. Tell us why you're here to help us reenact the Wedding of the Waters.
Well, I'm Russ Spainhour's great-grandson.
And Russ was the original rider.
Yes, correct.
Now, Joan, why did they choose Russ originally, his great-grandfather, to be the Pony Express segment of the Wedding of the Waters?
Well, that was not without thought. Russ Spainhour was the owner of the Anchor Ranch, and he was also the one that provided the ranch scenes for many of the Western pictures that were taken in the Alabama hills and the surrounding area. And he was a great horseman himself, so Father Crowley knew he would be able to be up to the challenge of the Pony Express.
Up to the task of being a
That's
Pony
right.
Express rider.
That's right, and we're happy to have his grandson here today.
His great-grandson.
Great-grandson.
Right?
Right.
Are you up for it?
Yes, I am.
Well, have you heard about this tradition in your family?
Yes, I have. My grandmother has told me stories about it, Russ's daughter.
Uh-huh. So this has kind of been passed down. You probably never thought you were going to be recreating this, did you?
No.
All right, well, here you go, Cheyenne. Let's get this passing off of the water. This is very historic right here. Now you can go sit down and rest.
Thank you.
I do it. And we're putting it on the horse. Be careful, that's valuable water and a valuable gourd. And you're going to go down to Lone Pine, which is what, about how many miles?
About 13 miles.
About 13 miles. You're heading down just like your great-grandfather did. And we'll just stand right here and watch you head off.
Okay.
Congratulations. Good luck.
Thank you.
We'll just watch you ride off down the road. Okay, here we are. We've made it down from Mount Whitney, and I'm standing here with, introduce yourself to us.
I'm Joy, Russ's daughter.
That's right. You're the daughter of the man who originally did this, and the grandmother of this fellow right here.
Right, that's
So
correct.
you're keeping it in the family.
Well, we hope so.
All right, now let's hand it off to your, how was the ride down?
It was pretty nice.
Very historic,
Yes,
and how can you argue with scenery like this?
can't argue at all.
You all are used to this, but for those of us from the city, this has been spectacular just being here. Did you have any historical flashbacks thinking about what it would have been like for your
Oh, yeah, a few.
great-grandfather?
Yeah, you sure do think about it.
Okay, let's hand it off here. This goes to the next generation. And wait a minute, there's another generation here too, isn't there? You're his mom.
Yes, I'm his
So we're going to hand it off to you. It's staying in the family. And before you hand this off, we're going to introduce this lady right here. This lady is Mrs. William Boyd.
That's right.
And for those of you who don't recognize the name William Boyd, you were the wife of Hopalong Cassidy.
That's right, yes.
William Boyd.
William Boyd.
And
I'm
you all
Mrs.
were,
Hoppy.
you're Mrs. Hoppy, and you were both here for the wedding of the waters in 1937.
Yeah, we were married that June.
And
in
came here in
37,
October.
Came here in October. Yeah, most
All right, now you know we're having this reenactment.
Yes.
And you were kind enough to come here to represent not only your husband, but this particular segment in the wedding of the waters. So now we have the gourd being transferred over just like it was to your husband. Now hold on to that, don't spill it. Hold on, because these fellas here, you were here that day.
I was here this day.
What was that like?
It was very exciting. I was standing out in the middle of the road out here. They blocked everything off.
Well, we can't do that today. We hadn't blocked it off today, but the whole town was excited about this,
Very much. Yes, it was a very exciting time.
One of the biggest things that's happened in a long time.
I think so, yeah.
And you were here too?
Oh, yes, I was here. I was 12 years old, and I was in the general area, but there was such a big crowd here that I think being 12 years old, I didn't actually get up to see the gourd. So I'm glad to see the gourd today.
Well, wait a minute. Let's get this gourd. Come on over here and show him the gourd. This is not the actual gourd. This is a replica of the gourd.
I saw a lot bigger crowd the day I was here, but it was so crowded I couldn't actually see the gourd. I was a lot smaller than I am now.
Well, that's the gourd. You can hold on to it, but don't spill it. And this was a 3-day celebration.
Yes, that's true.
So they blocked off the street. Yep. There was a big crowd here. Everybody knew Hopalong Cassidy, didn't
they? Yes, they sure as heck did.
And there was another celebrity here, too. You said the governor was here.
The governor was here, absolutely, yes.
Okay, we've got this huge crowd here. Not as big as it was in 1937. This is now a Western wear store, Lloyd's. Back then, it was a bank, wasn't it?
Bank of America, yes, sir.
And this was probably the only bank in town had the biggest, safest safe in the county.
I would think so, yep.
Because what happened was your husband took this gourd inside the bank for safekeeping overnight before this wedding of the waters picked up again the next morning. So if we could all kind of file in here now. Come on, everybody, let's go in. The horse has got to stay outside.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Let's all go inside and take the gourd into the bank vault, which is still in here. Okay, here we go. Come on in. You don't know where you're going, do you? Well, let me show you. We're right back here. We've done some scouting, and this is the old Bank of America, which of course, still your bank. And here we go. No, you got to go straight. And then go to your left. And this is the original vault back in here where the gourd was kept. They're now using it as a shoe repair shop.
Look at the equipment.
Yeah, now turn around so we can get a good picture, because what we've done is we have found this book that actually has a picture in it.
I've never seen that.
That's a picture of your husband and Father Crowley standing right here, and they're getting ready to put the gourd inside for safekeeping overnight. We're creating history here today, and as we end this particular segment, we'll get one last shot of the gourd hidden overnight in what was once the bank vault. It's now a shoe repair center. But it's historical. This is exactly where it was kept back in 1937, guarded by Hopalong Cassidy. Well, here it is, bright and early the next morning. We have brought the gourd out of its safekeeping overnight, and now the real history begins, because I'm standing here with Patrina Johnson Rich. And Patrina, you are one of the few living participants in the wedding of the waters, and that's because you were just a little girl.
Yeah, I was 10.
Now tell us what your role was in the wedding of the waters.
Well, I went in the bank and someone handed me the gourd. Then I came out in front here and handed it to Governor Merriam.
Right. Now how did you get chosen to do this?
Well, I think it's because my grandfather was one of the first 3 white men to climb Mount Whitney.
Mm-hmm.
And then my dad's another A.H. Johnson, and he was the last Pony Express rider coming into here the night before.
So your father had been the Pony Express rider to bring the gourd in the night before and hand it to Hopalong Cassidy to have it put in the vault. Well, do you remember much about that? You were just 10.
Yeah, I could remember a lot of people around, and I was kind of...
So this whole area was full of people?
Yeah, just all around there.
And what were your duties exactly? You were holding the gourd just about like this.
Yeah.
And what would you do? Where did we take it?
Just down where Governor Merriam was standing.
Okay, let's go down here.
By the prospector and the burro.
And before we get to the governor, we're going to stop because this gentleman, you were here that day, weren't you?
Yes, I was here, right across the street over there.
And it was a big crowd, a lot of excitement?
Very big crowd and lots of excitement.
Do you remember the little girl bringing the gourd out?
Yes, I can remember her. I think she had pigtails on that day.
And the reason this is interesting because they ended up getting married. You didn't know that at the time,
No,
did you?
I didn't know that at the time. I didn't even know who she was.
Well, here we are 60 years later. You've been married all these years, and we're kind of going back in history. So come on over with me, and we're going to take it over to Governor Merriam. Now, of course, Governor Merriam is no longer with us, but somebody else is. Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Florence Cross, Governor Merriam's granddaughter.
Now, when was Governor Merriam governor of California?
From 34 to 38, 39, somewhere along in there.
So he was definitely governor when the Wedding of the Waters took place.
Definitely, yes, I should say.
And what does your family know about Governor Merriam's involvement in the Wedding of the Waters?
Well, he had a diary that my sister-in-law had in her collection, and he wrote about the day that or the 2 days that he spent up here, or 3 days, whatever it was, I've forgotten now.
What did he write? What did he say?
Oh, he mentioned getting up and participating in the ceremonies. He said that he received the gourd from a little girl and passed it on to a burro driver, I believe it was. Then he mentioned that the gourd was carried by the various transports, the burro, the covered wagon, the train, and he mentioned going to Death Valley and mentioned Indian Wells and what's the yes.
So
yes,
he was
yes.
part of the whole thing.
Apparently so, yes.
Wasn't this kind of unusual? I mean, today to get a governor to spend 2 or 3 days in any one place is a big deal, much less a little town like Lone Pine.
Well, you know, you couldn't believe how much grandfather loved California, and he loved every part of it, and he enjoyed going around. He was always making speeches somewhere. He went to every Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors meetings, I think, and Realtors Board of Directors meetings, and he even mentioned that he spoke here after the parade or after the barbecue or something.
So you think he had a good, all the pictures we've seen of your grandfather at this event, he was smiling from ear to ear.
Oh, he loved it. He loved this kind of thing.
So he really got into it.
Oh, I'm sure he did, yes.
Well, he's not with us, but his spirit is certainly here today, and his relative is here today. Your name again is?
Florence Cross.
Florence Cross, the granddaughter of Governor Merriam. And you said something earlier that you hoped she didn't do what her grandfather did.
Pat me on top of the head.
So the governor patted you on top of the head?
Yeah.
Well, that was a nice thing to do to a little 10-year-old girl then. Don't pat her on the head this
I
time.
will not.
Okay, let's get the transfer over. This is very historic. There it goes. Now, what did the governor do at this point?
That's a good question. I don't know. He didn't record
Joan,
that.
you wrote the book. Come here and tell us what he did at that point.
As far as I know, I think he gave it to the prospector.
And who was the prospector on the burro?
The prospector actually was a man named Sam Ball, who was a Death Valley prospector, miner.
Okay, so now Sam Ball is not with us, and you're not related to Sam Ball, are you?
No.
And for all we know, this burro is not related to the original burro either, is it?
Well, it could be.
Could be. Well, let's say it is. So here's Governor Merriam, and he's giving the gourd to Sam Ball. And where are we going to put this?
We're going to tuck it right in here.
All right, be careful.
very
That's
safe.
valuable water now. You know what you got in there.
You bet.
And Sam started out down the road here for Death Valley. Now, you didn't obviously go all the way because there are a lot of other things that are going to happen on the way, but you understand the historical significance of what we're doing here today.
Oh, I do. You bet.
You're up for it.
I'm up for it.
And the burro certainly looks excited.
Yeah.
And the governor would have been right here, probably waving his hat or
Could be, very well.
doing something
yeah,
like that.
Oh, that's one. Well, I think it's on the Historical Society thing. They said that he was on the back of the train waving, and I don't know whether that's where campaign people started doing things like that. But he wasn't campaigning at the time. He was just.
Well, governors are always
well,
campaigning.
That's true.
You
that's
know
true.
that.
Yes, that's true.
All right, well, here goes the burro.
All right, here we go.
He's heading down the road. We got the gourd safely on top. And we're off on this beautiful morning in the Eastern Sierra, recreating the wetting of the waters. Well, it doesn't get any prettier than this, does it?
No, this is about as pretty as it can get.
I know you've been heading away from the mountains, but did you stop a couple of times and just turn around and take a look?
You bet I did.
Because this is something that definitely hasn't changed since 1937. The mountains, the sky, the open spaces, this is exactly the way it was back then, and in fact the way it was thousands of years ago.
Absolutely right.
All right, and you took good care of the gourd. Where's the gourd?
Right here, right where.
All right, let's pull it out because you and your burro have completed your part of the trip. Be careful, this is valuable, you know. Burro did a good job. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
Come on up with us as we make the handoff because we've got something very exciting here. We have our oxen here, and we have our wagon here, and we have a very famous descendant here. Introduce yourselves to us.
I'm Barbara Boyd.
And Barbara, why are you here today riding in this wagon?
Josephine Breen and I are descendants of the Donner Party, Breens.
And Josephine rode in the Wetting of the Waters back in 1937, and you are a what distant relative of hers?
We'd be cousins.
You came down from San Juan Bautista today, where you lived just like she did back in 1937. Why did they get her down here all the way from San Juan Bautista?
They were looking for people who were part of history, and they chose her for her descendants. And
because she's very famous.
Yes.
The Breen family is known as, I guess, the major descendants, the people who survived the famous Donner Party when it crossed over.
the 7 children, the whole family survived.
Great. Well, we're glad your descendants survived because you're here today. And let's let you pass off the gourd to her because that's exactly the way it would have been done. And the pictures that we have of her, she was about right here, wasn't she?
Yes, she was.
So
Same spot.
you are recreating history. You
Yes,
got to
I am.
hold on tight to that.
I will.
And here are our oxen. And your name, sir?
Scott Davis.
I was interested in the history of these oxen. When I think of pioneer days, I don't necessarily think of oxen, but you told me that oxen were used quite a bit in early California.
Yeah, they used them quite a bit because they could haul more weight and stuff on these bigger Conestoga wagons and through these hills and stuff. Plus they used milk cows for oxen too because they could get the milk from them as they're going along.
Really?
So they used them for quite a bit of stuff.
And when would these have been used primarily in California? In the early days?
Yeah, I'd say mostly in the early days, and they could use them to plow here when there wasn't as many horses and stuff, and they just lasted longer with them.
And there are not many of these around left, are there?
No, these are mainly used for this stuff here and Hollywood and stuff like that. That's about it.
Well, we're not Hollywood. This is a historical reenactment we're doing here today. And we appreciate you being here.
Sure.
And oxen and these kinds of wagons would have been used right out in this area, wouldn't they?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they'd have them 2, 4 abreast or however many they needed for the load they were carrying.
Wow. Okay, are you holding on, Barbara?
Yes, I am.
because we're ready to start.
Okay.
You're just going to head out across the countryside.
Yes, sir.
Or we're ready. I've never seen this before. This is going to be something to watch. Barbara?
Yes.
What was it like riding up there?
It's bumpy. It's hot. It got very windy. I have a lot of respect for those people. I got
your relatives would have spent weeks, months in wagons like this.
This is how they traveled, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
All right,
amazing.
you got to hand over the gourd.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You're representing the Breen family. Yes, I am. I'm proud of that. And now we come to even a more exciting part of our journey. Joan, tell us what's next on this saga.
Next, comes the 20 mule team, which carried borax from Death Valley over to Mojave. And the person that drove the mule team was called a mule skinner. And they were at what they call the jerk line, which meant how the animals had to get their direction, either left or right.
Now, how did they choose who was riding in the borax wagon back then?
Was Johnny O'Keefe. He was a old-time experienced mule skinner. And everybody knew he was one of the famous mule skinners, probably the last of his line.
Johnny O'Keefe.
Johnny O'Keefe.
Okay, well, Johnny O'Keefe is not with us today, but I'm going to hand this gourd to this gentleman right here. And your name, sir, is?
Lee Roser.
And tell us a little bit about these wagons and these teams of mules, because we think of them primarily with borax because they made them so famous, but wagons like this were used all throughout this valley, weren't they?
Right, this valley, the west, and mules were used more than horses for freighting purposes. They were more durable, especially in the west, desert areas. Mules were tough, and that was the main freighting method.
Well, now wait a minute. Were these mules tougher than these oxen over here?
Well, they said that coming across, on the westward migration, that the oxen a lot of times even outdid the mules. The mules outdid the horses by a long shot. But for the long haul, probably the oxen.
Okay, we're getting ready to start. Now, Louis, if you'll pull back and take a look, we must admit we do not have 20 mules. We're on a budget. So we've got 6. And that would have been common too, wouldn't it?
Yeah, 6, 8, up to 16 were real common.
Well, I'm going to climb in here with you, and we're going to head off into the sunset here.
All right.
Get up. Get up. Now, how hard is it to drive one of these teams of mules?
You've got a lot of lines to kind of keep all. You need to keep adjusting them as you go along to keep each mule in position. You can't just drive the leaders. You've got to, drive each pair. These first ones here closest to us are the wheelers. The next one are the swing. And then we've got the leaders out there in front.
Boy, it takes a lot of skill, doesn't it? You can't, you got to know what you're doing.
A lot of practice, yeah.
Where's all this wind coming from? This is part of it too, isn't it?
Yeah, this is. I think a storm's maybe coming in here.
Oh my gosh. Wow. You are really in the elements when you're sitting up here.
Think of this being here all day, huh?
Absolutely. Man. Well, we got kind of a leisurely pace. I'm holding on to the gourd here.
All right. Yeah, can you imagine going to LA and this?
now gotten off the mule team, and look what we got waiting for us here. Bill, you're from the museum. What's the history on stagecoaches in this area? Why would they have had a stagecoach?
Well, up until 1883, when they built the first narrow gauge railroad into this area, stagecoach would have been the main way of travel between the mining towns around here, like Panamint City, Darwin, and the valley towns, Independence and Lone Pine.
So they actually had stagecoaches here, but of course the idea was to use means of transportation for the history of California. So it wasn't just this valley they were talking about, it was anything in California.
Right, the ones in this area were probably a little more rustic. This is a really beautiful piece of equipment.
What do you mean rustic?
Well, this was the desert, the last of the Wild West, really. There were some pretty rustic looking pieces of equipment in use back in the 1880s.
So this is kind of the buffed out.
This is like a city coach.
And you know, we've got a comment on this too. When we started, you could see the Sierra chain of mountains here. Now because of this dust, you can't even see the mountains out here.
Yeah, you're experiencing a real historic Owens Lake dust storm today. Once Los Angeles took the water from the Owens Valley down to LA, the lake dried up by about the mid-1920s. So any day there's a good wind like this, we get a good dust storm.
Could there have been a dust storm like this during the actual wetting of the waters in 1937?
You bet. There certainly could have been. The lake was dry then, and there was probably wind there.
Yeah.
There usually is here in the Owens Valley.
Well, there's wind. Louis, look over here. Here are all of our viewers over here. It's windy, isn't it? Everybody's holding on to their hats. That's part of it. And Joan, now tell us about this segment right here. Who would have been driving the stagecoach?
That would be Ollie Dearborn. He had been a stagecoach driver back in the 70s and 80s.
1870s and 1880s.
He's quite an elderly man, but he was asked to be on the stagecoach because he's more authentic than any of the younger drivers.
Great. So, of course, he's gone. And who would have been sitting up there? Is that Governor Merriam I see up there?
That's Governor Merriam, exactly.
That's what I thought. Let's take the gourd over. We met Governor Merriam earlier out in front of what used to be the bank. Here's the gourd.
Oh, good.
And do you think the governor would have enjoyed this part of it?
It probably would have been one of his most enjoyable parts because he was willing to do most anything, and I think an adventure like this would have been just great with him.
Okay, you're representing him again.
And I
you're
feel
with
the
us
same
for
way.
you're with us for a lot of this reenactment. He was in a lot of the segments.
Yes, he was. Yes.
And you were asking me a minute ago how fast you wanted us to go, and what are the options we have?
They traveled in pretty good speeds because they had depots, you know, they could switch horses out all the time. Like the other rigs, you know, they wear them out, they'd have to wait. These, they could switch horses out, so they could go pretty good.
So you can go at a pretty good clip.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think the governor would have wanted him to do?
I think he'd probably want him to go the maximum amount.
You think so?
I think so.
All right, well, hold on to the gourd.
Okay.
And I'm going to get in the back because I want to see what this is like myself. And we're off. Okay, I'm now standing with Myron Alexander, and Myron, the water has been handed originally back in 1937 from the stagecoach to the steam locomotive back at Dolomite Loop. And it went by train then down to Keeler, about 6 miles by train. Right. Well, now let me hand you the gourd. That's come from the stagecoach to the train. But unfortunately, you know, we're trying to historically reenact everything. The track, the train no longer exists, does it?
No, the railroad's gone. The right-of-way remains, but the tracks are all gone. The stations, all the cars and engines are gone, with the exception of number 18 here in Dahee Park.
Okay, number 18, and that's where we are right now, because this locomotive is exactly like the one that it would have been handed off to back in 1937.
Certainly. Yes, very true.
This one actually ran on the line called the Slim Princess.
Yes. Narrow gauge track, 3-foot gauge. This engine was built by Baldwin in 1911.
Well, we're kind of bringing it back to life today because back then, in the 30s, in the 40s, this train was very popular with the locals, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It was part of the scene. This was called a kind of disorganized railroad. It would stop in the middle of the desert on a hot day, and when they were crossing the river, the Owens River, and the engineer and the fireman and the conductor get out and take a swim. If people stuck their thumb out along the right-of-way, the train would stop for them and take them wherever they wanted to go. It was a busy railroad, but not a very profitable one.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we have wonderful old footage taken during the Wedding of the Waters of the train cutting through the desert on its way to Keeler. There were crowds on either side of the track to watch it come by. There were automobiles following on the roadway right beside the locomotive. It was a big deal.
Oh, it was. We railroad buffs do that today, too. Whenever we hear of a steam engine, you know, being run for special runs and everything, and it will happen with us today.
Yeah.
We'll have lots of people. We have lots of people right here.
Well, we got us a little crowd going right here. We're on the side of the road in downtown Independence, California, not very far from where this old locomotive once ran on the Slim Princess line.
Yes, you're right. Right alongside Highway 395.
Absolutely. Well, now I'm going to have to take this water back, the gourd back, because we're now going to take it down to Keeler. We're going to have to go down by automobile because there's no track left at all, is there?
No track left at all.
This is about what's left of the old railroad.
Yes, and we're restoring it.
Well, it's still here along with a lot of memories of that day back in 1937 when it carried the water in this gourd on board, and we've got a crew. Fellas, stick your head out the window so we can see you. The guys have been here working hard to get this old locomotive steamed up for us today, and we're going to end this segment of the Wedding of the Waters reenactment. What's going to happen here?
Well,
hopefully
they're going to pretend that the locomotive is running, and we're going to fire it up and blow the whistle and ring the bell.
You ready, fellas? Here we go. We're off to Keeler. Arriving in Keeler by train back in 1937 was a big deal, and Keeler itself was a thriving little desert community. These days, of course, the train's gone, so we drove into town, and things are pretty quiet. But it's still home to some hardy souls, some of whom remember Keeler's glory days and the celebration for the Wedding of the Waters. Slim, you were here, weren't you?
I'll be here. I'll be here. Oh, sure, I'll be here.
You remember that day? Big crowd here?
Oh, yeah, the big crowd. Yeah.
Big crowd. And John, you were born and raised here in Keeler.
Yes, I was.
You remember the train coming in, not that day, but the train that came in after that.
Yeah, I would come in to pick up ore and take it back out. And because there was a narrow gauge steam engine train here, they would film a lot of Western movies here as Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, Hopalong Cassidy, Annie Oakley used to be filmed.
And they discontinued this back in the 1950s.
Oh, that's correct.
And I find it very strange to drive into town and you see a train station here, but no tracks, no train, but the train station is still here.
And it's in pretty bad decay right now.
Now, you were here that day when the train came in with the gourd on it.
With the gourd, that's correct. That's right.
What was it like that day?
Well, it was very exciting to say the least, I think. Everybody all knew the train and so forth and what was going on with this particular situation. It was very exciting. Everybody was real gung-ho, shall I say.
Of course, the train pulled right in here. And Joan, what happened when the train pulled in?
When the train pulled in, the Lincoln Zephyr, which was the very newest Ford Lincoln Zephyr, and it was driven by a gentleman named Louis Meyer, who was a 3-time Indianapolis racer, car racer, and they asked him to drive the new car.
So it went from the train to the Zephyr.
That's right. It went from the train to the Zephyr.
And the Zephyr was kind of here to symbolize the latest mode of transportation from the train to the car.
That's right. We were getting more advanced.
More modern.
Day by day.
Okay, come on, Bill, because the story continues. Now, I'm handing you the gourd, and because this is an intergenerational thing, your father held the gourd that day.
That I believe is correct, to the best of my knowledge as well.
Now, why did they choose your dad to pass off the water?
Well, my father was, say, superintendent of the talc mill, and he was quite well known in town, and I think they trusted him to be sure it got to the right place.
Well, we trust you to see that it gets to the right place, too. You're carrying on the best family tradition because we have... Come on over here. Let's set this thing up. Your name, sir?
Walt.
And this is your wife.
Joan.
And what have we got here?
1938 Lincoln Zephyr.
So this is exactly the way the car... It's not the same car, but it's the same car.
Identical model and everything, right.
And was this... is this a hot car? Is this... I imagine when you drive this down the road, you get quite a bit of attention.
Oh, you bet, nowadays. And it gets over the hills and cruises along with other cars pretty well. So it's a lot of fun to drive.
And back then, would this have been something that would have really turned some eyes?
Oh, yeah. It's probably the first successful streamline automobile that went into production in 1938. There had been earlier attempts by Chrysler, for example, but they were kind of ugly. Nobody wanted them, but this was a real hit. And right up through World War II, it was a popular automobile.
So this would have been a big deal to see this thing drive into Keeler, wouldn't
it? You bet. Brand new design, right.
All right, well now let's recreate this, because the train would have been right over here, and the car would have been right here, and your dad, Bill, would have passed the gourd over to the race car driver. So let's do that now.
Got it. Good.
And now you're going to get in the car with your wife, and you're going to hightail it out of here.
Right. All the way over the mountain to Stovepipe Wells, I think it is.
That's right. You're going down to Death Valley in this car.
Exactly.
Don't break the speed limit.
Don't worry. Especially uphill.
Now, this is interesting, Joan, because up until this point, all the travels we have been on have taken us on a road that already existed.
That's right.
And that's the road that existed right over there.
That's right. That road was the road to Darwin, and it went over a very difficult hill called Zinc Hill. And it was so bad that cars had to go one by one. And as they went up the curve, what happened is a lot of times the radiators would boil over, so they had to take a little pause that refreshes.
Okay, so that's the old road, the Darwin Road.
That's the old road.
And here's the new road, and this is what all the hoopla was about.
That's right.
California 190.
That's right.
And this, right about here, is where the big celebration was held. Tell us what happened right here.
That's right. They had made a prearranged event that the governor and all the other officials were here ahead of time, but they had told or asked President Franklin D. Roosevelt to run the telegram that would sound the signal to cut the ribbon. And Western Union had cooperated and arranged to have a Western Union station here to receive the message. And exactly 11:30, Franklin D. Roosevelt over in Hyde Park, which was his home, pushed the little telegraph button, and the signal was given, and there were 3 sharpshooters from the Los Angeles Sheriff Department that were able to shoot the ribbon.
So the sharpshooters from the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department shot the ribbon.
Yeah, just true Western style.
We are recreating that day back in 1937 when this stretch of highway going east, California 190, was officially dedicated. Okay, here comes the car, Florence. This is great. Hold real tight. I'm getting as excited as they were back in 1937. Oh gosh. Hold on. Yay! Okay, here comes the Zephyr. It has made it safely into Death Valley. The old Zephyr made it.
Don't spill the water.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, now, Joan, we're here.
Yes.
What would have happened back in 1937? There's the Zephyr, and here's this airplane over here.
Well, what happened was the gentleman, Louis Mayer, who was the driver of the Lincoln Zephyr, transferred the gourd with water to the airplane. And the airplane was the pilot was Warren Carey, who had been a World War I ace pilot. And then he flew with the gourd down to Furnace Creek, picked up Superintendent T.R. Goodwin, or he was known as Ray, and then they flew over from Furnace Creek, they flew over Badwater. And Badwater is the lowest place in the nation, and poured the water down over Badwater, which
From the plane.
From the plane, of course. And this consummated the marriage of the water from Lake Tulainyo, from the highest to the lowest.
We finally made it. It was consummated.
Exactly.
Because I didn't think we were, gentlemen, I didn't think we were ever going to reach this point. We're finally here. We don't have a World War I flying ace with us, but we do have
a Korean war pilot. Flew 100 missions in Korea.
That sounds good enough to me.
Now.
Your name, sir?
Raymond Powell.
And you're going to be flying the plane today?
Yes.
So we should have the Zephyr driver hand the gourd to the pilot. That's a symbolic handover right there. Don't spill it. And you're not standing here by chance, are you? Introduce yourself to us.
My name's Ted Goodwin. My father was T.R. Goodwin, the superintendent of Death Valley at the time.
So he was the fellow who actually, from the plane, poured the water out of the window into Badwater.
Yes, he was.
And you weren't in the plane at the time. Where were you?
I was at Badwater, and I watched the whole sequence at Badwater.
So you actually saw it happen?
Yes, I did.
Now, did you actually see any water coming out of the plane?
We did see what appeared to be water coming out of the plane, but it did not reach the water, Badwater. It evaporated first. But anyway,
not one single drop?
I don't think so.
Well, hopefully one drop made it.
Well, right,
because the whole idea was to wed the waters from the lake down to Badwater.
Yes, yes.
Flying out over Death Valley on that October afternoon and nearing the end of our adventure, it was impossible not to think back to October 1937 and imagine how excited those original participants must have been at what they had accomplished. They had staged a wonderful three-day pageant filled with color and excitement, a celebration not only of the opening of a new highway, but of the wedding of the waters.
I love you, California. You're the greatest state of all. I love you in the winter, summer, spring, and in the fall. I love your fertile valleys, your dear mountains I adore. I love your grand old ocean, and I love her rugged shore.
Well, hello everybody, I'm Huell, and I sure hope you enjoyed this adventure. If you'd like to see it again or share it with your family or friends, or perhaps donate a copy to your local school or library, it's available on video cassette and on DVD. All you have to do is call 1-800-266-5727 and we'll be glad to send it to you right away.